Welcome to the City of Troy Planning Commission meeting on February 23rd, 2021. Tonight's meeting is being conducted remotely using the GoToMeeting remote meeting platform. This is due to the COVID-19 pandemic. For those watching tonight's meeting on television or on the city's YouTube channel, we welcome you. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available on the city's website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. Our first item of business after the roll call will be a resolution temporarily suspending and modifying the Planning Commission bylaws and rules of procedure, which will permit us to proceed with this meeting virtually and to afford an opportunity for us to receive public comment. We have made every effort to ensure that the meeting adheres to the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. We have provided opportunities for public comment via telephone and email prior to the meeting, and all public comment, if any, will be shared with the Planning Commission. At this time, I'd like Kathy Sarnicki to conduct the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Faison. Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Krent.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Here.
Ms. Malala-Holly.
Here.
Ms. Parakis.
Here.
Mr. Rahman.
Here.
Mr. Roush.
Here.
Mr. Tagle.
Here.
You have a quorum present.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like a member of the commission to move a resolution to suspend and modify our bylaws so that we may conduct tonight's meeting via a video conference link. Mr. Sadek, Mr. Rahman, Sadek made the motion. Any second? Mr. Roush, I'll pick. Okay. Roll call, please. Ms. Sarnicki.
Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Krent.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Hudson.
Ms. Malala-Holly.
Yes.
Ms. Parakis.
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Mr. Roush.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is approval of tonight's agenda. Do we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Lambert, and a second by Ms. Parakis. Roll call, please.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly.
Yes.
Ms. Parakis.
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Mr. Roush.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
And I believe Mr. Faison has arrived. Can you hear us, Mr. Faison?
I can. Sorry for being late.
It's okay. We were voting on the agenda to, if it's okay as printed. You okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine. Absolutely.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item is approval of the minutes from our February 9th, 2021 meeting. I have a motion for approval of the minutes of our last meeting.
Got it.
Mr. Rahman, okay, and a second by Ms. Malala-Holly. Ms. Sarnicki, a roll call, please.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly.
Yes.
Ms. Parakis.
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Mr. Roush.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Thank you. Next item is public comment for items submitted via email or telephone message. Do we have any public comment?
There's no public comment submitted.
Thank you, Jackie.
You're welcome.
Next item on the agenda is preliminary site plan approval file number SP1019-0041, proposed Langview Estates, east of Crooks Road, southeast corner of Livernois and Latonia, 4080 Livernois, Section 15, currently zoned NN Neighborhood Node H District. Who do we have presenting tonight? Mr. Carlisle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening to the Planning Commission. Tonight before you is a proposed condominium or townhouse project. As the Chairman noted, the subject site is located on Livernois, just north of Wattles. The subject site is outlined here in the red outline. Includes 3 parcels and it's a total of approximately 1.6 acres. You'll note that there is an existing 1-story, approximately 7,000 square feet office building on the site. That building was recently improved with a new facade as part of it, just through the building permit process. The property itself is a neighborhood node, and multifamily as proposed is a permitted use in this district. You'll note that the site is surrounded by single family to the northwest, north, and east, and to the southwest and south is neighborhood node zoning at the intersection again of Livernois and Wattles. Proposed site plan is shown here in front of you. Again, just to outline, this is the existing office building that is currently on site and has been improved. The applicant is proposing to construct 8 townhomes that would front on Latonia. Access to the site would be off of 2 points of access off of Livernois here. We should know that there is a 3rd parcel as part of the site, but it's not at this point proposed for any future development. And all access to the site will be off those 2 existing curb cuts that do exist already on Livernois. With regards to area height and bulk, we do note that by the dimensional standards, the application meets the zoning ordinance requirements. However, there is a provision in the zoning ordinance with regards to transition. One of those obviously is in relationship to height. We do know that the height of the proposed townhomes indicated in the site plan is 39 feet. That being said, the maximum height of the adjacent residential to both the north and the east is only 30 feet in height. And in fact, most of those homes on the adjacent neighborhood are all single family 1-story ranches. We also note that the existing building on site is a 1-story office building. So this picture shows the proposed elevation of 39 feet. This is the elevation, the front elevation that fronts on Latonia. This is looking at the corner of Livernois and Latonia, and you can see across the street is a 1-story ranch home. This is the picture of the office building, the 1-story office building on site that's under construction. So we are asking the Planning Commission to consider if a 39 feet high, 3-story buildings, 2 buildings essentially, on site really is an appropriate transition and a comparable transition between the existing 1-story office building on site and the surrounding 1-story residential properties to the north as well as to the east. With regards to parking, this was reviewed, the parking has been reviewed by both myself as well as the engineering department. We both know that the office building itself is actually deficient in the terms of the number of handicap spaces. And many of the spaces on site that serve the office building are actually short with regards to how the required length of a parking space. So they're going to have to expand or extend existing parking spaces. And lastly, the applicant needs to provide bicycle parking because it's not provided on the site. The site was reviewed by the engineering and the fire department with regards to circulation. The fire department has expressed concern with regard to the fire apparatus moving around the rear parking lot, specifically in this corner location, and they don't feel that they can meet the required turning radius, and so they're asking the applicant to reconfigure the spaces or the curbs in order for them to properly get a fire apparatus around the site itself. With regards to the driveway, the engineering department noted that the driveway needs to be 30 feet wide at the radius, and so they are 30 feet wide radii. They're too narrow at that point, as well as the parking drive aisles must be 24 feet in width, and most of them are only 22, or some of them are only 22 feet in width, so they're too narrow based on the engineering standards. The engineering department notes that though Livernois is a county road, they do believe that they will require a right turn deceleration taper somewhere in this general location as part of the site plan. And so they're asking that they consult with the road commission with regards to that requirement. The engineering department also reviewed the circulation and does conclude that the rear parking area, specifically in this general area, is poorly configured and is rather awkward. So in conjunction with what the fire department says, they're asking for some reconfiguration of the curbs in order to allow for better and more smooth circulation in this particular area. And lastly, there were two requirements with regards to pedestrian connectivity that the engineering department has noted. The applicant did submit a landscaping plan. The landscaping plan was deficient in 3 areas. The first area is, you'll note in this red kind of circle, that there are no landscaping or screening within this location. The applicant is required to provide screening between the townhomes and the single family to the east. This line of 13 parking spaces is required to be broken up with one landscape island with a tree inside of it. And lastly, the applicant indicated screening enclosures, but the details were not provided in the plan, so it's unclear to us as to how they propose to screen the trash enclosure. The applicant did provide a photometric plan. A total of 4 pole-mounted fixtures are proposed. The applicant did not indicate any building lighting, and specifically, we would like an indication of what the building lighting is on the front as it relates to Latonia, with regards to how it may screen or impact those properties on Latonia. The applicant did not provide cut sheets of what the proposed fixtures are. And lastly, we note, and specifically in this kind of corner area, that the photometric plan exceeds the maximum requirement at the property line, and so they are required to provide or to reduce the photometrics in this corner of the site. These are the elevations that the applicant is proposing. This top elevation is the elevation that will front on Latonia. This is the rear elevation. This is the garage side elevation that will front interior to the site and interior to the existing office building. And this is a side elevation that you'll see from Livernois itself. The applicant is proposing what we think is a brick material, but the details of it were not provided on the elevation, so we're asking for clarification on that. In addition, we have asked the applicant to provide answers to the site design standards that were in the zoning ordinance that have not been answered to this point. As noted, there are specific standards in the zoning ordinance with regards to both design standards as well as site plan review standards. At this point, we find it difficult to answer these questions until the applicant addresses the other site plan issues noted that we previously noted in our review. So with that being said, we are recommending that the Planning Commission discuss the matter, but postpone any action to allow the applicant to resubmit plans. And specifically all those numbers that I've listed, I'm not going to go through them, but there are numerous ones, and of most particular concern are those of the engineering and the fire department, because those affect life, health, and safety. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm open for any questions from the commission.
All right, thank you, Ben, for that. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Sabadat, for that matter? Ms. Barakis?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I had a question, Mr. Carlisle. I drove by there today and looked at it, and there did seem to be an office building there south of the proposed property, which I believe is the one that you said had been improved. So I'm a little bit confused because I thought we were talking tonight about the townhomes, but then we keep talking about a possible office building, and then there was even a picture of something under construction. So is that going to be a second, and they even share they share an entrance. We're talking about 2 entrances, one that goes into an office building, one to the townhome. So I'm a little bit confused.
Yes. So, and Director Sabadat can jump in here because I was not part of the discussion with regards to the office building. The office building was allowed to be essentially reskinned and refacade based, just go through the building permit process because they were not changing the use of that property. And so that was just done through a building permit process. But because the townhomes are on the same site as the office building, we look at the site in total with regards to parking, access, circulation, fire, landscaping, etc. But the actual office building itself is not under review because it was done under it was done under building permits and not required by Planning Commission review. And Director Salvin, if there's anything I missed there, please correct me.
When you say the office building was done under building permits, it was basically a reskin of the exterior of the building. I mean, it wasn't a new office building. It was an existing office building that they made it aesthetically way better.
Go ahead, Ms. Parakis.
Because they share a site, are they required to connect? And it's a little bit confusing to me why there's the communication between the townhomes and the office building in terms of the circulation. Is that a requirement that they have to do because it's a single site, or can they have it be the townhomes separate from the office building?
The ownership group is represented here this evening, and we have one gentleman who specializes in commercial development and another gentleman who specializes in residential development. The one who specializes in office development did the office, and the one who specializes in residential did the residential development. It's they own the same they're on the same property, and this was the application that was provided to us was sharing of the parking and having that relationship. Could they have separated it? Yes, they could have, but this is what was proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Rahman.
So all these are owned by same owner, right? Just to make sure it's clear. All three parcels are owned by the same owner. That is correct. Okay, I have one more question.
Just to clarify that, in regardless of who owns it, it could be owned under multiple ownership. We're treating this as one zoning parcel and one site plan. So ownership really is not. From a zoning perspective, it really doesn't matter. We're treating this as one parcel.
But if it is multiple owner, then each has to agree, right, to give permission to drive around in others' property.
Yes, but that's a private matter between the private entities and really not really a concern of the Planning Commission. We would ensure that the proper easements are in place, but from a site plan, we consider this one site.
Go ahead, John.
Ben, if it's three different parcels, are there setback requirements for each parcel with regards to parking and building location? As opposed to if it was one parcel, the interior lot lines, if you will, would kind of go away and there wouldn't be the requirements off of those interior lot lines. Is that correct?
Yeah, and maybe I wasn't very clear. As a requirement of, I believe the assessing is going to require them to combine these parcels into one parcel if this is approved. Right now, it's three separate parcels, but it will be, my understanding, it will be combined with one parcel.
So if I could just follow up on that, if we're looking at this as three separate parcels, do we need to consider the setbacks from the internal property lines at this point? I mean, if the petitioner comes back and says the property has been combined into one parcel, then we can look at that and not consider the internal setbacks or the setbacks from the internal property lines. But as of today, what we're looking at are three separate parcels.
Well, I guess I'll look to the applicant to clarify that this is going to be combined into one parcel.
Well, yes, its intent is, but well, assuming it's own, they may have time to do that. But as of today, it's not one parcel.
It could be. I mean, it could be a condition of approval. It's probably going to be a condition of approval by the assessing department as part of the review.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more question.
Go ahead, Mr. Rahman.
So the neighborhood node extends how far? Is that the last parcel? or it goes further?
Latonia is the most northern parcel of this neighborhood section.
Okay, so the houses are not in the neighborhood node. The houses on the northern side are not.
Single-family homes are not in the neighborhood node. This particular side of the neighborhood node on Livernois is actually 4 parcels north of Waddles. Includes 4 parcels north of Waddles, 1 parcel deep on Livernois.
1%. So on the east side, it will be still residential.
Single-family residential.
Okay, there is a single family house there. Okay, thank you.
This single family directly to, well, essentially 2 single families directly to the east and 2 directly to the north.
They are all on the residential node, so they cannot have taller building.
They're R1B and their maximum height is 30 feet.
Yeah. And then the last question is, you said this we are allowed 30 feet height building, right, in that residential, but these are ranch style. So how do you know the height of the existing buildings?
I don't know the height of the existing buildings.
No.
They are 1 story, so anywhere from 14, 15 feet is my guess.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Anyone else? Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
Yes, I have one question. Mr. Carlisle, I see that the applicant brought this in November of 2019, and then staff was able to give him some input on the drawings, and which he didn't incorporate into this presentation. I'm curious as to why you would recommend postponing this to come back again. I guess that's my question.
As opposed to not bringing it to you, or as opposed to denying it?
As opposed to denying the application. The application he hasn't complied with your requests, and we've had this on the table now for, a year and 3 months.
I can't speak to why this was brought in for you. I reviewed the site plan and presented my report. So I'm unfortunately, I'm just going to direct Director Soutton as to why this is on the agenda tonight. I apologize for not being able to answer the question.
Then I guess I asked Mr. Soutton, why would you recommend postponing action as opposed to denying the application?
Because these are not insurmountable issues that the applicant is facing. The applicant is able to address these issues, take input from the Planning Commission this evening on the standards of the zoning ordinance, and come back with an improved site plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, I apologize, Mr. Roush. I guess I misunderstood your question. I think as I interpret your question, is why are we even bringing this to you tonight? Why we didn't recommend denial is because, like Director Savant said, I think from a planning perspective, these are issues that we can work around and find solutions to, and specifically, we have some, the most important concerns are the engineering and the fire ones that they'll obviously have to address. But where we want the most input for is we have obviously have expressed some concerns with regards to height and transition, and we want to make sure that the Planning Commission, before they go back and spend a lot of time and money revising the elevations, if there's not a concern by the Planning Commission, then they would need to do that. So we always like to get the input of the Planning Commission before we make hard and fast decisions on applications.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Ms. Malala Holly?
Thank you, Mr. Krent. Mr. Carlisle, just a quick question. I know you mentioned the south of that office building, that single-story office building, is an area that is, we are not sure at this present moment what is being planned. Am I correct?
My understanding is it's still going to be an office building based on the parking requirements set forth.
I see. Okay.
I should say based on the parking provided.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions for staff? Well, seeing none, I'll let the applicant explain his project.
Good evening, Planning Commission and Chairman. Thank you for taking the time, and I have listened to the input that you've had. Let me draw back a little bit. 2019, my firm purchased this property. Whether, I don't know how many people realize that this is the original post office for Troy, Michigan, built in 1958. I've come in here and expended tremendous dollars in renovating this building, and I would recommend anybody wanting to stop in and take a peek, please do. It is a pride and joy. So, secondly, the project was originally purchased by our group as a neighborhood node. And the purpose of that purchase and that acquisition was to build a comprehensive project based around properties that this city is trying to develop that have unusual constraints. Old subdivisions, old trolley lines, curb cuts that are outdated, just a lot of different aspects of a piece of real estate today that make it very difficult for people like myself to make them economically feasible. So the way to do that was to take this project on and integrate not only parking facilities, because most communities today don't want more parking fields. They want parking fields utilized effectively between uses. This represents, in my opinion, a transitional zoning and transitional project for the neighborhood. I have personally met with the neighbors that I directly affect and have no negative responses from them. In fact, they look highly upon what I've done with this property. The property was sold to an individual back in the 70s and was run basically as a warehouse up until 2019, when I spent clearly large sums of money to make it what it is today. I do not do residential real estate, as the staff has told you. I'm a commercial developer by trade. I've owned and had my business in Troy for 27 years. I'm a resident of Troy. I live up the street, a mile and a half. So I share your concerns as residents. I don't think there's anything on this plan that's insurmountable. And additionally, I think you need to look at it from the perspective of these areas of Troy were zoned specifically as nodes. And the purpose of that node, and I went through and listened to a number of planning commission meetings, presented, sat at the staff level when they were trying to develop these processes. And these are the kinds of things that you get when you develop these properties. We need to work together with the developer and the city to establish a project that works within this area. When you start throwing lots of quote new requirements at it, then you tear buildings down and you start fresh. We didn't do that here. We wanted to keep some of this history. We wanted to integrate it into the neighborhood, and we wanted it to make it look like it's supposed to be, which is a transitional development, not a cookie cutter development, not a parking lot sitting out in front of a building. The reason we did what we did was to give the residential piece its own ambiance, connect it into a commercial piece of property so that we can utilize the resources of both properties during off times. Would you rather provide a bunch of parking out there that sits vacant for a day during the day, or would you rather have that parking be utilized by this building when it's actively used during the business hours? And I would suggest to you that if you come over to this building and watch how it interacts with the community and how it interacts with the customers that utilize it, you'd be pleasantly surprised. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself, by the way. I'm Vince Pangle. I am the owner of Strategic Property Services. And my address here is 4066 Livernois Road. This is my corporate headquarters and where I hope to be for a long time, quite frankly. I'm prepared to answer any questions to the best of my ability. Gary, by the way, I'm sorry, I'll introduce Gary Apathere. Gary is my partner in the transaction. We're doing the residential project together. I can address the south side of the parcel. It is, we do own that parcel also. We have no plans right now. We're just waiting for a right opportunity to show up. Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Ron?
This is, I don't know if it is maybe not for the applicant, but more general question is, I know that there's a Troy Historic Village is right opposite this property, right? That's the proposed property. So is there any consideration given that, that there is a historic village there? Is there any, like, from a design standpoint, been considered, like, when this proposal was,
if I might touch on the design a little bit, we actually, the building as it looks today and what we did to the building short of the gray color, all of that represents what the original post office looked like back in the 50s, with the limestone facades, with the wing walls, and the way the only thing real different than that, than the original post office is we added somewhere in the neighborhood of about 65% glazing to the exterior of the building to open up the inside. But it really is meant to look like the old post office, quite frankly. The flagpole's in the same place. The only thing that was different than the original design was we did bring in a canopy for weather protection coming into the southwest corner of the building. I'm sorry, southwest corner of the building.
Because I'm kind of looking at the Livernois elevation.
Mm-hmm.
That would probably not look very, very nice. I know that probably the Lithonia elevation is nice and brick and stone, but I'm not sure I agree with that. That that elevation would be something I can present that this special effort was given. So this is just one thing. And then the second question I have is also, is it possible to reduce the height and still can make a townhome?
So I know that
instead of 3-story.
Excuse me. I know that I just got a text message from Gary that he's lost connectivity. He really is responsible for the residential component. We've had a number of conversations relative to what it's going to look like because we do want it to have some connection. And I point in on that connection piece because we're trying to connect the projects. We want it to have its own identity. And that identity comes with the look and the feel of what we're trying to do here. I'd have to direct that to Gary. Those are the kinds of things that we can deal with.
Okay, anyone else for the applicant? Mr. Faison. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So 2 questions for the applicant. You've mentioned a couple of times that you want to connect the residential to the commercial. And I'm curious, so are they going to have the same type of look in terms of the buildings and the exteriors?
That is the intent of the project, is to tie the 2 projects, and eventually it will be 3 projects or 3 buildings together to have some similarities. But they also need their own identity, but that is the plan, yes, sir.
So understood. And then the other question is, I think you heard before that there's a potential recommendation to postpone, and there's a number of open items or items that are issues. And I think I see 16 enumerated. So are you prepared to address all of those items that have been articulated as issues?
If I can just for a minute, when we first started the project, we did this under a remodel permit. We have looked at a number of different options, plans, schemes to develop the property. It seems to be the best use of the north piece of property, short of doing single family homes that wouldn't integrate and don't, quite frankly, aren't allowed in the district. From our perspective, what's been presented, we feel like those things can be overcome, but there's going to have to be give and take. Normally, and when I do this this is what I do for a living, normally we have the ability to sit down in person at a conference table with the staff planners or outside planners and discuss openly a lot of this stuff. We've not had that availability, and quite frankly, coronavirus has put everybody in our business back on their heels because it's really difficult to follow through. We've submitted plans on places that have been sitting idle for over a year because people aren't having meetings. So there's no intent in the delay in our project other than the fact that the timing and what has gone on with regards to the corona. I don't see anything that's presented to us short of things like tapers and expanding curb cuts into building areas that are already there. I don't want to make this a raceway. I don't want it to, quite frankly, like I keep saying, the intent of the project is a neighborhood node. It's not to look like any other commercial project. You don't see a lot of commercial projects. The closest commercial project integrated into a residential development is the one that was just approved on Long Lake and Livernois next to the Trevara hardware store. I don't want to look like that. That's not the intent. The intent is to make this look like something different. So I don't think that there's anything in there that's insurmountable. there are things in there that I think become deal killers. And then the question becomes, from a community standpoint, what's the position from a planning and a staff? If a parking spot is a foot short, or if a curb cut or the curbs are 5 feet shorter than normal, but they provide adequate access into a residential community and into a commercial environment, produces tax dollars for the community today, and allows properties like this to be developed. I mean, there's got to be give and take, in my opinion. That's my opinion. But I don't think there's anything here that we can't either overcome and or come to an agreement on.
Okay, thank you. And my other question was similar to Mr. Rahman's about the height of the buildings and the potential flexibility with that in your plans. I don't know if Mr. Apithera is on and can discuss that. Maybe not.
He's there. Yeah, he's there.
Can you hear me now? I just
Yes.
got back in. Where you're talking about the heights of the building,
Yes.
trying to lower them?
Dealing with the transition issue.
We can look into seeing what we can do on dropping something. Maybe from the west to the east, lowering the building heights. Something like that sound right?
That sounds like a step in the right direction from my perspective. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, for jumping in and not being right.
No. This is a discussion. We don't have to be terribly formal. I just want to make sure we're just not talking over each other. That's all. Yeah, Ms. Parakis.
I think one of the transition features that concerns me is less about the height going into the neighborhood, but more about looking ahead. I believe what's on the corner right now, the south east corner of that intersection with basically Waddles and Livernois is a one-story building. And then we have an empty lot, and then we have another one-story office building, and then we have north of that a three-story townhome, a kind of wall, if you will, going into the neighborhood. So I mean, I'm trying to figure if we go one story and then in a couple years down the road, you come back to develop that southernmost property that stands empty now. I'm trying to picture what that would be. What if you propose a three-story thing and then it's like one story, three-story, one story, three-story, or even if it stays one story, we're still doing 3 one-stories and then a three-story. So that's the transition that I think is difficult for me right now, and I'm just trying to picture how that would go, and less about going into the neighborhood. I don't know that it would look right to taper it down into the neighborhood, because when you're heading north up Livernois, it would look like that.
So if I can, once I can address the zoning, I don't think the rules as to how high you can build buildings, zoning ordinances and communities, and do that with law. So I do know that the remaining property to the south, one of the lots which we do own, the other lot we do not own, which has an existing single-story professional office building, is also in that neighborhood node district, and also allows for more liberal height restrictions. I think with the way the ordinance is written today, that the property could go, the properties to the south could go maybe 3 stories or even higher. When you start to do that, you run into complications, especially with the size of the parcel we have there, to park it. I mean, that's where you really get into an issue there, because you don't have adequate surface areas to park the building today. And as you go, vertical costs go up, et cetera. So it's hard to judge what's going to come down in the future as to what that property will bring and what happens at the very hard corner, whether or not that owner stays in there and he sells, and what happens there. It's hard for me to do anything other than point everybody towards the zoning ordinance and say, as a developer today, that's what we have to live by. If we want to rezone the property, it's a completely different animal. The investment was bought with the intent of taking the zoning in place and utilizing it in place and working within its boundaries, and that's what we're doing.
Okay. Ms. Moala Holly.
I have two questions and an observation. I drive by in front of the building that was recently spruced up, and am I correct that does the board say that there is some kind of rehabilitation services and an Edward Jones office in that building? Am I correct in my observation of that gray revamped building that sits?
You are correct. It's known as the training room, which has been
Yes.
a long-term resident of Troy also. They moved from the Troy Sports Arena. They're an occupational therapy group, or physical therapy, sorry, I guess both. And then the other one, and you're correct, is Edward Jones. And then the rear of the facility, there's 3 tenants in the building. In the back of the building is my operations, which are strategic property services.
Got it. Okay. Currently, the building is not being used, in the sense nobody's coming in and out of those rehabilitation services or Edward Jones, or is it currently being used actively?
It's open and operating every day.
Okay, got it. What is your idea for the future in terms of that south side area, which is currently, of course, not planned, but what are you thinking 5 years down the road, 8 years down the road? I don't know. What are you thinking in that area? Another office building?
I'd really like to do a Chick-fil-A, but I don't think you're going to let me. No, I really don't know. It needs to fit within the development scheme here. I could see an office building with maybe a residential component to it. It's really hard. Right now it's there. It's a separate parcel to the building. It's not a really large parcel. Could it be combined in the future with the corner to do something different? Certainly. But I have right now, all my plans are set on taking on this next phase, which the first phase was redeveloping what I have. That's all complete with the exception of a sign that's in the process of being installed once the weather breaks. But short of that, the building itself is remodeled, done, occupied, everything's good. The next phase is the north phase, which is the residential component. And that's where the focus is at. We put a sign out to the south side to see if there's somebody that comes along that's interested in doing a building. Could be a professional office building. It's really hard for me to speculate at this point in time because when I start speculating, I get in trouble, and I don't want to do that. So really the focus is on the north side.
Yes, I understand. Latonia basically has ranch-style homes. Majority of the homes that I drive by in that area are all ranch-style homes. I know this has been addressed, and I'm not going to beat around this bush again, but I do know that the building height is something that I too would want to express concern on, because when I drive in that area, Latonia Drive is all single-family homes or not too tall homes. Having a townhome of this height and this massing, I would like to express my concern about this project, though. So just wanted to voice that as well.
Well, I understand, and I think Gary addressed that. We will definitely take a look at the height parameters of the building. Keep in mind, we're still designing as to what the ordinance or what the zoning classification allows us to do. And now you also have to keep in mind that it provides a screening mechanism for people also, and that the parking is contained inside the building. So there's some of that element that comes into play. There's ways to manipulate the exteriors of the buildings, and there's ways to work within the boundaries of height restrictions. And it's something Gary's going to have to address as he designs the interior of those spaces.
Thanks.
Hey, anyone else? Mr. Tagle.
You had mentioned earlier that there were some items on the list of 16 or whatever that were deal breakers. Could you identify what those, in your opinion, are deal breakers for this project?
Oh, the biggest one that comes to mind is manipulating those curb cuts out onto the thoroughfare. Whenever you involve doing tapers, relocating utilities, those kinds of things, those become very cost prohibitive when you're working with the kind of, if you're going to build a 400,000 square foot shopping center or a 1 million square foot warehouse, it's a lot easier to find the dollars to do those offsite infrastructure improvements when they're warranted. And I'm not a traffic consultant, but I've done a lot of this in my life, and I'm not sure either one of those curb cuts warrant a taper. from my opinion, because we don't see that much activity. I mean, the roadway is an active roadway, but let's face facts, it's no Rochester Road. So those are the things, when you start to layer off-site improvements to the project, that's where it becomes deal breakers. You got to key in on a couple other things too. It may not fit squarely in the cube like everybody likes things to fit, but you also got to remember we're doing things right now and have already done things to improve the community around us. We're going to improve the storm system. Right now, the building was not required to be connected to storm systems. That's going to be changed. We're going to redo all of that stuff. We're taking a building that, quite frankly, could have gone into a landfill and reused it. Really, it's a piece of history in the city. The city, I mean, it's the first post office. I think that's a pretty cool thing. I mean, there's an old trolley line out there that I've worked time and time again with the city to document and show off. I mean, these are the kinds of things that most developers come in today and would rather hit it with a dozer. Quite frankly, taking a dozer to this building and this property is a heck of a lot easier than what I'm trying to do. But I'm a resident here. I drive by it. I work here every day. I'm proud of what I've done, and I want other people to be proud. I want to leave a legacy. And by leaving legacies, you have to overcome certain things on properties like this. When you start adding, $150,000, $200,000, $300,000 offsite infrastructure improvements, that becomes a difficult pill to swallow. Internally, I'm certain internally on this site, between the engineering group, Gary, myself, the staff, we can overcome a large majority of them that don't affect the health, safety, and welfare of anybody or any occupant in this property. I point you to, keep in mind, we're close to Latonia Road. You can do things from Latonia. I'm not, the fire trucks and all that stuff need to move around on this property, 100%. I get that. But you also have a lot of property to access from outside the boundaries, Latonia Road, Livernois, et cetera. So.
Well, I appreciate your explanation, but if I remember the presentation, that road, jurisdiction of that road is the county. And if the county feels that it's a safety issue with the amount of traffic on that road and a decel lane would be appropriate, that's what they're going to ask for. And so that's a little bit, beyond our review because of it is a county road. As far as the other items on the list, you say they're all doable, but quite honestly, I've looked at that site and I think you're trying to put more on that site than that site will yield. But if you think you can make the parking spots the required depth and you can make the drive aisles the required width and make the maneuverability for the auto and for your trash pickup reasonable, that's what we're looking to give you the opportunity to do that. With regards to the buildings, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're here tonight talking about your townhouse development. The existing office building is an existing building that's been rehabbed, refaced, and we're not really here talking about that. We appreciate what you've done. I think it's a very nice looking building. But the issue is that you're now adding 8 townhomes here so that you're adding that, I won't call it a burden, but you're adding that to the property. And so really, I appreciate your explanation about what you've done with that building, the single story office building, but that's a given. What we're trying to talk about here is what's coming as a result of the additional construction you're proposing. With regard to, you've used the word transition a lot, and it's been mentioned. I do not think a 3-story townhouse makes a reasonable transition to a ranch-style neighborhood for the most part, nor a single height office building. This is going to stick up, like someone said, like a wall. And so I really think you should rethink that as far as a transitional element that's bordering on the north side of the node. And then lastly, I'd also like you to consider on that building, you've considered the side street, Lithonia, as the main elevation. However, because of its size and its mass, going north on Livernois, that south elevation is going to be as visible and important, and maybe more so, than the north side. And you're treating the south side of that building as the back of the building, like it really doesn't matter when you look at how you've treated the north side. So that's another element that I'm going to be looking for if you come back in front of us, that south side has to be improved significantly because there's really, you've got two front sides the way that building is positioned on Livernois.
If I might just a second address the reason that the office building came into play, it has to do with the integration of the sites. And once you touch one, you trigger both. So that's the intent is here. We're talking about townhomes, and I agree 100%. It's townhomes. The reason you draw in the considerations that you are is because of the integration of the sites and the utilization of parking facilities and storm facilities and the like. So the elements for design and fronts and backs, I really have to leave that to Gary. He's the pro. That's why Gary and I are partners in this deal. That's why I brought Gary. That's why Gary's here to do this with us. So that's, we're just as interested as everybody else in looking at it. And everybody's idea of the word transition is different. With my experience, I've always seen transition not as necessarily height as use. But I take that into consideration. I don't want anything here that doesn't look like it fits.
Right, and I think right now you hit the nail on the head. It doesn't look like it fits. It's a 3-story mass that really is going to stick out very, very much so with the surrounding buildings.
And you can appreciate the fact doing what we do this is the time that we get this feedback, and people that are good at what we do take the feedback we get from the communities and then put it on paper and try to develop a plan that meets most of the goals. We can't always meet 100% of the goals, but it's important to hear the feedback. We want to know what the community and you at large represent this community. And that's what Gary and I need to hear. Take that into consideration. If it does not economically model, it won't be built. We don't do business that way. It's not,
I understand. I understand. What might help us all when you come back in front of us, come back with a couple of three-dimensional models, computer models of how this building is going to look both from north and south going on Livernois. Just let's see in context, which is, again, I think that's in the ordinance that's a requirement, but I think that would help once you look at the massing of this thing, put it in context with the surrounding properties. And I think that will maybe even help your design team actually see what you might be up against.
Absolutely. Good suggestion. Thank you.
Sure.
Yep. Mr. Savadon, I know Mr. Hudson had his hand up first, so unless you want to follow up with.
I'm just following up with something that John said. Bullet point number 16 on the recommendations in the report says to provide 3D color renderings as suggested by Mr. Tagle.
Very good. Okay, Mr. Hudson.
I want to say I agree with all my fellow commissioners as they are concerned about the height, the transition, and this massive building in the midst of older Troy and one-story homes. Even the commercial building, which used to be the post office, is one story. It's going to be completely out of place. And unless there is some real consideration given to making this transition a little more amenable, I'm going to have trouble supporting this project.
Anyone else? Mr. Roush. Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
Sorry, tried to get to my microphone. Just one more comment with reference to that. And I wanted to, I didn't say earlier to Mr. Pagel, the Troy Post Office building looks great. I think you did a great job with that. The building massing, when you look at it from the perspective of comparing it to a 2-story home that's maybe 30 some feet tall, the appearance is dramatically different when you're seeing just a certain amount of fascia and the balance of roof line. So when you look at this, what you have currently proposed, you see nothing but 3 stories of building front. And then the other challenge that you have that makes it, in my mind, difficult to transition to the neighborhood is the house next door sits back 70 feet from the property line, and the bulk of the homes on the street sit back at least 60 feet. And then your building sitting 20 feet back from the property line it really makes it more, right in your face, so to speak. And I don't mean that derogatory, but it's just like right there, right in front of you. So I think you've got those challenges, and trying to do this with 3 stories, I don't see it transitioning. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I'll jump in for a second. I agree with a lot of the commissioners about the mass of this building. With John Taylor, I think, did an excellent job of describing the look at it, the look of that building compared to surrounding buildings. And then we always have, as a commission, this is not the only project we review in Troy, obviously, and there's going to be there's been a lot of angst in the neighborhoods about the transition. Transition and compatibility are the 2 big issues, and they are part of the zoning ordinance. It's not separate. It's inclusive in our decision, and I can only say that this particular 3-story building, you're at 39 feet, and the maximum for any surrounding homes is 30 feet. You're 9 foot over what anything you're trying to transition to. So it's right. It's a non-starter for me to start at 39. You would start at 30 and transition to your 1-story building. To me, it's basically a sore thumb sticking out of the earth. So with that, and with Mr. Roush's comments about the setbacks compared to surrounding homes, both of those issues, I think you're going to have to work hard to figure out how it really is going to be part of the neighborhood as opposed to a sore thumb sticking out of into the neighborhood almost. So those are my quick comments. I agree with Mr. Hudson. I couldn't even think of approving something like this at that kind of massing and that kind of distances and very little transition to that neighborhood. So that said, anyone else before we bring forth the resolution? Mr. Savadan.
Yeah, there were some comments made about the history of the area. And so I went on our GIS and I looked at the old zoning district, the zoning of the property before 2011 when we created the nodes, just out of curiosity. And the parcels that we're talking about this evening were zoned O1 office. The parcel on the corner was actually zoned residential, but it was controlled. It's been an office for a long time, and it was also controlled by consent judgment. So there'd been some litigation there to allow the office building there. But the underlying zoning prior to neighborhood node was O1 office with a maximum height of three stories, 36 feet. The reason I looked that up is because we were talking about history. I was curious about what the zoning was prior to neighborhood node. And, it's going to be something. We've got, it's on Livernois, and you're at a fairly busy corner. It's going to be something. It's going to be zoned something. Right now, it's like Mr. Pengel said, there's a law that governs land use. By law, they can go higher than single-family residential, but we also have in that law we have transitional standards that the Planning Commission is going to apply to ensure that it's a good transition. So we're meeting this evening to find that balance. And while there were a number of issues with the site plan, again, I don't think they're insurmountable. This is one of the roles of the Planning Commission, is to try to find that balance. And I thought it was important to bring this site before the Planning Commission, even though there were some issues, to have this discussion and to have the Planning Commission communicate their concerns with the applicant. Sometimes I wish we had more meetings like this where we're not going to take action. We're simply going to get feedback. But that's all my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rahman.
So I'm still a little confused about the parcel. So these are all 3 independent parcels, right? As of now?
The parcels are 3 separate parcels. When they were purchased, they were Well, a combination, I think, of two parcels. I'm trying to remember, but I've gone through the assessing department and separated them off into independent pieces. And there's a reason for that.
What I request is, before it comes to us next time, can we identify if it is independent parcel or it is combined? Because that one of us mentioned about the setback rule, so you can really assess properly. Is it something can be done?
I really can't address that, Ben, as much as you can from the standpoint of how it works within the neighborhood node.
Yeah, we'll look into it. We'll have an answer, a confirmation with regards to whether or not it will require to be combined or not.
Thank you.
I might just take a moment and thank everybody for the time. And I appreciate you letting us come before you. We take all of the comments tonight extremely seriously. We want to develop this parcel in a thoughtful and meaningful way. And once again, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Lambert. Go ahead.
If we're ready for a resolution, I'm prepared to offer one. Resolve that the preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed Langview Estates 8 units located on the southeast corner of Livernois and Latonia. That's 4080 Livernois, Section 15, zoned NN, Neighborhood Node H, District B, postponed to provide an applicant an opportunity to address the issues identified in the planning consultant's report and by the members of the planning commission.
Do we have a second?
I support.
Okay, Mr. Faison supports. Roll call, please.
Ms. Malala Holly,
Yes.
Ms. Parakis,
Yes.
Mr. Rahman,
Yes.
Mr. Roush,
Yes.
Mr. Tagle,
Yes.
Mr. Faison,
Yes.
Mr. Hudson,
Yes.
Mr. Krent,
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. The next item is Planning Commission comment. Anyone have comments to make? I'll start with Ms. Malala Holly.
Thank you, Mr. Krent. Mr. Savidant, I asked Chairman Krent this question earlier before we started the meeting today. On Long Lake, just before Rochester Road, there are 2 homes currently built. I think they're all site condos. And one, I think they are still it was in the works, at least as of last fall. And I was curious to know, A, whether the homes were sold, because I did see the Orion Home sign in front of those homes, and the walkway has not been developed at all. I just wanted to know if you have any thoughts on this. Do you know anything about those 3 homes that were proposed to be built there, and why the walkway has not been addressed yet? I don't know whether you can share anything, but I thought I'll just bring it to the table.
Yeah, I don't know the parcel you're referring to. I'd have to look into it. If you could email me the details, just a couple sentences exactly where it is. I don't need too much information. I look into it and I can provide you with an accurate answer.
Sure, thank you. I'll do that.
Thank you.
Ms. Parakis, anything?
Yeah, I guess just a comment, I suppose. I think what's tricky about these neighborhood nodes is that, as Mr. Savidant said very well, there's a zoning ordinance which permits certain height requirements, for example, but then we also have to consider transition. And what happens is we start with the corner property usually to think about transition. And it's hard to speculate what's going to happen with empty lots. It's hard to speculate what's going to happen with the corner lot. It's older, maybe someone's going to build it up, but we're trying to make decisions on new buildings. And it's just hard to know. I mean, I'd be less surprised if those ranch homes end up becoming two-story homes down the line quicker than the corner lot becoming a 3-story building. So it's sort of, I feel like a continuous predicament with these nodes, trying to get them developed and offer clear guidance to developers. It's really tricky.
Mr. Lambert, you want to jump in?
I wasn't going to address that particular issue, but I had something else I was going to bring up, if that's okay.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to have a request Mr. Savina and Mr. Carlisle maybe to give us an update from their presentation at City Council last night on the master plan process, and to find out if there was any kind of a resolution made on how that's going to go.
Well, we can provide a summary where we're at with regarding the conversation we had with City Council. So as you're aware, the Planning Commission reviewed a proposal for amending the master plan. Planning Commission made a finding that the master plan was in pretty good shape, but there were some amendments that we need to look at, including looking at the neighborhood nodes. That proposal went before City Council late in 2020, and they approved it. And the proposal indicated that we would start work on the project in February of 2021, this month. When we presented to the proposal to City Council, both Ben and I suggested that we should, to some extent, delay the start. We can start doing some work on the master plan, but what we really wanted to do, what we've heard from City Council, from Planning Commission, from residents, is citizen engagement is really important. Now, we could do a pretty good job of citizen engagement if we engage remotely during COVID, but I think the amendments that we're going to be looking at, including neighborhood nodes, really we should have some in-person engagement, and it's really difficult to do that right now in COVID. So we talked about last night with City Council. We talked about conducting some elements of the plan now and having some engagement remotely, but also delaying the project somewhat so we can hopefully, knock on wood, things are looking up and we can do some engagement in person. We also have the challenge that the data that we have from the U.S. Census Bureau is 2010 data, and the release has been delayed, and it's very important for having 2020 data, particularly when we're looking at some things like housing. And housing for empty nesters and the elderly and things like that, population statistics that are very important for making policy decisions. So we are going to, and I can let Ben talk here in a second. There's some elements that we're going to start, and we'll bring it before the Planning Commission in the near future. But our initial proposal of being very aggressive in completing the project in 2020, I think we're going to push it back so we can have some quality, some innovative, and some quality engagement with residents. But Ben, what did I miss?
I don't think you missed anything, Director Savina. I would just say right now, our company is in the process of updating about 5 master plans right now, and they're all being done virtually, and with regards to community engagement. So one of the things we told the City Council, we can certainly continue that into the near future. When we wrote our scope, it was done in October, November of last year, and obviously things have changed significantly since then, and things are changing, almost daily or weekly with regards to the vaccines and the pandemic and everything else moving forward. That being said, we got some pretty clear direction from the City Council that they wanted to keep the project moving, and so we are going to do online engagement and interaction with the public as well as with the Planning Commission and the Council. But there still should be some back end in person when it's safe and when we can do that in hopefully sooner than later of this year and maybe into the winters of this year as well. I think the thing that also really surprised us and surprised people in my field is We were under the understanding that the census data was going to be released in December of 2020, at the end of, supposed to be December 31st of 2020. And then that's how we wrote our scope. Our scope was written in October with that understanding. Well, come to find out now that the first round of data won't be released until the end of April of 2021. And we're not even sure they're going to meet that deadline. So it looks like it may be pushed into the summer of 2021. And why that's important is for a couple of reasons. One is we're working off 12-year-old data, and you never want to adopt a plan, certainly with data that old. But really where it becomes an issue is we want to ensure that we get accurate and representative engagement from the population. And so if we note that we sent out a community survey and we're getting a certain demographic is missing, we want to cross-reference it with the census to ensure that we are picking up equal and representative populations. And so that may change our engagement strategy once we find out what the actual demographics are in the population. And so that's why we don't want to close out the engagement until we have the actual census data to compare it with what, to make sure that we are capturing the entire population of Troy. So it's a long way of saying that we're going to keep things moving forward, but it may not be as quick as we initially thought. And I think that's, I always say it's better to do it correct than do it fast. And so we will ensure that it keeps moving forward, but we don't want to adopt a plan that's kind of half-baked. So I hope that answered your question, Mr. Lambert. Is probably longer than you wanted.
Okay, Mr. Rahman, go ahead.
No, I just happened to be on Census Bureau's webpage, and I found that the demographics data will not be available until May, I think, or something like that. So, we probably really have to wait until sometime. My request is at least if we can discuss what's going to be our plan, what we're going to do when you do our community engagement, what kind of data we're going to be collecting from the community, and what is our scope. If we can talk about those things in this the next few weeks or months, that way at least from a planning commission standpoint, we'll be ready when things get better. We'll have some idea what we need to do. So maybe my proposal is, can we just bring this discussion as a regular item at the end of our, planning commission major items, agenda items?
Well, I'll defer that to
Go ahead, Mr. Carlisle.
I'll defer that to Mr. Krent and Mr. Savant with regards to putting this up on the agenda. I will say that we are formulating a plan with regards to what the engagement strategy is going to be in timelines and groups and folks. And so we will definitely share that with the Planning Commission and get your input once that's complete. And that should be done within the next, I would say, couple, week or two.
Yeah, we're hitting the point here. We'll be hitting it. We'll be dealing with the master plan update at almost every meeting for months. I mean, you'll have lots of input into the planning. It's the Planning Commission's role to update the master plan, and you're going to be busy working on this document.
Very good. Okay, Mr. Tagle.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hudson.
I, along with Mr. Tagle, don't have any comments, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Faison.
Nothing from me.
Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll adjourn the meeting.